ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening, downloading, and subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this podcast, we're going to do an album review. We're going to take a look at one of the greatest albums, one of the greatest R&B albums from the 80s. The debut album from the group Guy, entitled Guy. This album was released on June 13th, 1988. Man, it's hard to believe it's been that long, but it really has been over 30 years since this album was released. And no better time than to do an album review on this podcast. And I think it's cool to do an album review because, quite honestly, a lot of you who will hear this podcast, some of you weren't around. Some of you, probably just didn't know. And the rest of you probably couldn't come outside in 1988. So it's always dope to take it back. For me, this album resonates a lot because I'm going to date myself. I was in high school. I graduated from high school in 1991. So I was actually in high school when this album came out. And so this is one of the albums that is the soundtrack to my high school. And I think if you lived through that era, you'll really understand and appreciate how important this album was, not just for Guy, the group, but just R&B and, people in general, anybody who lived through this era. This album, I think it touched people in a lot of different ways, and it exposed and birthed a lot of things. And I'll touch on them, as I talk about this album. But before I get into the album, let me just give you a little backdrop. 1988, if you've been following this podcast, you've heard me say that I think, without a doubt, that 1988 was the greatest year for hip hop. Now, of course, that has nothing to do with Guy, but it just goes to show you what was transpiring in music. Hip hop was starting to take over. I mean, when you look at the landscape of 1988 and you look at the albums that came out that year, it can go anywhere from He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper, from Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, Going Off, Biz Markie, Light as a Rock, MC Light, Easy Does It, Eazy-E, By Any Means Necessary, BDP, Follow the Leader, Eric B. and Rakim, and of course, Straight Outta Compton, NWA. It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, Public Enemy, In Control Volume 1, Marley Marl, Strictly Business, EPMD, The Great Adventures of Slick Rick, Long Live the Kane, Big Daddy Kane, Tougher Than Leather, Run DMC. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I could go on for days about how many great hip hop albums came out that year. But it wasn't just hip hop. 1988 also saw some phenomenal R&B albums. From Love Sexy by Prince, Giving You the Best That I've Got, Anita Baker, Heartbreak, New Edition, Don't Be Cruel, Bobby Brown, and In Effect Mode, I'll Be Sure. And of course, you have this album, Guy, self-titled album. What was interesting about Guy is that, at least for me, it seemed like they came out of nowhere. I mean, I don't even know. And I know Teddy Riley, who was one of the founders of Guy. I know that he had a presence, and I know that he already had a name in the music business and industry. But I can't really say that I'd heard of Teddy Riley prior to, this album coming out, which is interesting because I did not find out until years later that Teddy Riley actually produced The Show, the smash hip hop single, The Show, from Dougie Fresh, and Slick Rick. So that in and of itself speaks volumes about who Teddy Riley was as a producer. But Teddy Riley, along with, I think it was Gene Griffin, their former manager, they set out to start a group, and Teddy Riley got with a guy named Timmy Gatlin, and Timmy Gatlin brought him Aaron Hall, and they basically said, okay, hey, we're going to start a group. Gene Griffin was going to be the manager. Timmy Gatlin, Aaron Hall, and Teddy Riley were going to be the three members that would form Guy. And then something interesting happened. As they were recording this album and before it got released, Timmy Gatlin and Aaron Hall, they were getting into it a lot, fighting, so forth. Timmy Gatlin decides to leave the group. I mean, they recorded these songs and Timmy Gatlin decides to leave the group to go solo. And he is subsequently replaced by Aaron Hall's little brother, Damian Hall. And what's interesting is when you look at the album cover, Timmy Gatlin is on the album cover. I think he provides some background vocals. He did a lot of writing on this album. But he left, and Guy takes off and becomes, this smash R&B group. And not really sure what happened to Timmy Gatlin after he decided to go solo. I mean, he may have made a song or two. I can't even remember. But yeah, this album dropped amongst other albums in 1988. And it was incredible. It was an incredible feat. And it was just, when you think about the landscape of the R&B albums that I just named and the hip hop albums that I named, it was a lot of competition. So you really couldn't come whack. And I think that was one of the things that always stands out to me about this album is that, it's an entity in and of itself. It helped birth a sound, New Jack Swing, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But this album was incredible. And I think what happened was, for us, it was something that we gravitated towards as soon as it came out, and the sound and the look of Guy. And, it was a different look and a different feel for R&B. And we just took to it. This album, as I mentioned earlier, was released on June 13th, 1988. Now, the first single was released, and that was Round and Round, Merry-Go-Round of Love, April 12th, 1988. And then Groove Me was the second single that was released May 31st, 1988. Excuse me, 1988. I keep saying 98. 1988. So those were the first two singles that were released before the album actually came out. And that was something else that happened back in the day. You could, and you probably would, release a few singles before the album actually dropped. But this album was critically acclaimed. I'm pretty sure this album went multi-platinum. It was something that all of my friends had. I mean, like, it was number one on the billboards. It was something that was, when it was reviewed by the critics, critically acclaimed. Again, it had a sound and a feel that nobody, was doing. And that was because of the quote unquote New Jack Swing. Now, New Jack Swing is a fusion sound that is highly credited to Teddy Riley for discovering. Teddy Riley is the quote unquote father of New Jack Swing. And what New Jack is, or was at the time, and still is, I guess. And like I said, it was a fusion of everything. It was a lot of drum machines, synthesizers, samplers. It was jazz. It was funk. It was rhythm and blues. But it was all of that kind of mixed into one. It was kind of like a gumbo, if you will. And, Teddy popularized it. And again, he was credited as being the father of New Jack Swing. But it's a great feel music. And it just, when you hear New Jack Swing, you got to move. I guess that's the easiest way that I can describe it. It's not something where you can sit down and just chill. Whenever that beat comes on, it's New Jack and it's Teddy. And, it's interesting because Teddy was able to not only lend his talent just for his album as far as producing it, but, I mentioned Don't Be Cruel, by Bobby Brown. That was a New Jack Swing album. He had a lot of New Jack sounds and influence on that particular album as well. So, it wasn't just his group that he was sharing it with. But yeah, it was an incredible album. The production on this album, again, produced by Teddy Riley. A lot of the writing was done. All of the members, according to the liner notes that I'm reading here, all of the members wrote on just about all of the songs. In fact, Gene Griffin, their former manager, he's on just about every track. Timmy Gatlin wrote on just about every track. So did Teddy and Aaron Hall. So it's interesting that not long after this album takes off, not only do they not have Timmy Gatlin, but Gene Griffin, I think at some point stopped managing them, or they fired him or something like that. So, there was some turmoil early for this group, but it stood the test of time. And again, they produced a incredible album. But the production is, like I said, it's New Jack. It's up tempo. There's a couple of slow tracks on it, but for the most part, it's up tempo and it's feel good music. And it's got a little bounce, or as the kids say, it's got a bop. It's a bop. But, yeah, man, this is an incredible album. If you haven't heard it in a while, you need to listen to it as soon as you finish this podcast. As far as the tracks, man, the album starts off with Groove Me. I think it is virtually impossible for Groove Me to come on and you don't get up out of your seat and dance. If you feel the need to be sitting down while Groove Me is on, something's wrong with you. Aaron Hall singing, you got the keyboards, you got Teddy Riley. It's the perfect lead off song. Again, it's not something that you're going to sit down. You're going to jam. And what's interesting is, it doesn't matter where you are. You can be in your car, you can be at work. If this song comes on, you're going to start bobbing. That's just it's just the way it is. The next song, track 2, Teddy's Jam. Now, Teddy's Jam might be it's probably the dopest song with the least amount of lyrics in the history of music, because it's just Teddy's Jam. And he just says, jam, Teddy, jam for me. And he encourages Teddy to jam throughout the song. And that's it. That's all Aaron. He's just Teddy, jam for me. That's it. He doesn't say anything else. There's no lyrics. There's no science to it. There's no nothing. And it is arguably the best track on the album. Teddy's Jam, man. Again, if it comes on, you got to move. And it's a feel good song. And it is a song that still to this day, you got to just vibe to it. You have to. I'll put it like this, right? There's nobody who was around in this time that can say oh man, I don't like Teddy's Jam. If somebody tells you that they didn't like Teddy's Jam, something's wrong with them. Nothing wrong with Teddy's Jam. It's the joint. Then you move to track 3, Don't Clap, Just Dance. I love Don't Clap, Just Dance. Now, I have had 1 or 2 people in my lifetime say, oh, well, that kind of sounds like Teddy's Jam. I don't really care for that. It's a few. I mean, very minimal. This is a jam as well. And again, another up-tempo track. It just goes. It just goes. And I mean, again, the New Jack sound, it's a dope song, man. I mean, like, I don't know, even the few people that said that they didn't like Don't Clap, Just Dance, I don't know how. But again, another phenomenal song. Then you go to track 4, You Can Call Me Crazy. What's interesting about You Can Call Me Crazy is that Teddy is actually singing on this track. Now, Aaron Hall does most of the lead vocals on every song. And I don't think we really get a chance to hear Teddy sing that much. Not just on this album, but even subsequent Guy albums. It was believed and said that Teddy couldn't sing, but he could kind of carry a tune. And sounds about right. It sounds like, I mean, he's decent, you know. But to be honest, I'm going to keep it a bean with y'all. It was 88. We didn't care. We didn't care if he couldn't sing. Again, it didn't matter. It was Teddy and it was Guy and they were jamming. So it didn't matter. You didn't. Aaron Hall does and sings well enough to where it doesn't matter who else is singing. So yeah, he sings on You Can Call Me Crazy, but again, it's still another jam. So it's just one of those things where you got to get out your seat. Then we go to track 5, Piece of My Love. Now, this is where it slows down. And what's interesting about this song is that, at least for me and my friends and a whole lot of other people that I found out later on in life, there was a bit of controversy about this song. As urban legend has it, when the song comes on and Aaron Hall is saying an ad lib, it is believed, or at least we believed, that he said the words dumb bitch. Now, why would you say you could have a piece of my love, dumb bitch? That is beyond me. I mean, like, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Aaron Hall and Teddy Riley have refuted that that's what he said. Aaron Hall said that he said, come on, baby. Now, I'm going to let you decide, because you're going to listen to this album as soon as you finish listening to this podcast. You listen to Piece of My Love and you tell me what he said. Because I don't think he said, come on, baby. And he may not have said dumb bitch, but it really sounded like he said dumb bitch. Which, again, would make a lot of sense, because I think if you're courting a woman and you're trying to, get her to come to you, I don't think you would say you can have a piece of my love, dumb bitch. I mean, hey, this is just me. I don't know. I've never said, hey, come on over here, you dumb bitch. I mean, but hey, but nonetheless, controversy aside, that is one of the best songs on the album. One of my favorite songs. It's a song, man, that, I mean, Aaron Hall is just killing it. I mean, it's a ballad. It's a ballad, and there are not a lot of ballads on this album, but the ones that are on here are killers, and this is one. Then you move to track 6, which actually spawned the idea for this podcast. I Like. That's the name of this track. I was actually watching Love and Basketball. And there's the movie Love and Basketball. And there was a scene in which the characters, Omar Epps and Sanaa Lathan, were playing basketball against each other. And when they started playing, this song came on in the background. And when I saw it, I was like, you know what, man, I've never done an album review on Guy and this album. So that actually spawned the thought to do this podcast. Nonetheless, I Like, another banger. That one was on the charts for a long time. Can't go wrong. You can't, you put that, if you're making a tape and you want to party, you got to put I Like on there. The DJs never strike out when this comes on in the club. Next track 7, Round and Round, Merry-Go-Round of Love. Again, that was the lead single. Another banger. Another joint that was on the radio. A joint that I never get tired of hearing. Then we go to track 8, Spend the Night. Teddy's singing on this one as well. He's killing it on the keyboard. It's got the New Jack sound. Man, this song is so cold. And then this song, at least for me, gave birth to, the signature Teddy Riley sound where he goes, yep, yep. I mean, a Teddy Riley song is not complete without a yep, yep. So, you got to listen to that. That's my joint. Then we get to track 9, Goodbye Love. Again, there aren't many ballads on this album. In fact, there's only 2. The aforementioned Piece of My Love, the controversial Piece of My Love, and Goodbye Love. Goodbye Love, man. That joint is, if you did in 88, if you didn't have it on your Slow Jams tape, something wasn't wrong. Something's wrong with you, because that song is so incredible, man. Oh man, I could go on and on about the song. The song means a lot. I remember, the DJ playing it at the school dance at my high school. Shout out to Wilson High School. And we got a lot of love when that song came on. You had to be slow dragging on the dance floor, man. So again, at least for me, that song is very nostalgic because it takes me back to Wilson High School, and it takes me back to the fun times and, just kicking it with girls and just doing all the stuff we used to do. But, yeah, that song is I think it's one of the best ballads of the 80s. And really, for as dope as this album is, they really didn't need a lot of ballads. Just the 2 that they put on here was good enough. And then the album closes out with My Business. I'm going to be honest. I don't like this song. I know it sounds kind of weird for me to be talking so glowingly about this album and then to finish it. But I don't like this song. I think Teddy's singing on it. To be honest, I don't even really, it's a skip for me. I'm pretty sure there may be some of you who may listen to this podcast and say, hey, well, I love that. If you love this song, let me know. Honestly, they really could have stopped at track 9 and I would have been good. It would have been a perfect album. But 9 out of 10 is still phenomenal, because My Business is it's just awful. And it's not even what they're singing about. It's just how the song sounds to me. It just sounds misplaced. It doesn't sound good. But nonetheless, it doesn't take away from this album. This is a phenomenal album. This is one of the most influential releases of the late 80s, period, because this album set the blueprint for a lot of albums and sounds and waves that would come into the early and mid 90s, to be honest. So if it had not been for Guy, we would not have gotten a lot of the great R&B groups that we got in the 90s, because honestly, this album and this group paved the way for a lot of people. And I wish I had time to talk about how, as dope a singers as, Aaron Hall is, R. Kelly stole his style and profited off of it. But I don't have time for that, but fuck R. Kelly. But anyway, but yeah, he did bite his style. But nonetheless, this is an incredible album. It's personal for me because, again, it came for me in an era where I was in high school and I was really falling in love with music, and there was so much great music around that you couldn't help but be moved and influenced by the music. And it goes without saying that Teddy Riley and Guy, the group, they are legends, and this is a pillar in R&B music. And I think, again, like I said, had it not been for this particular group, we wouldn't have had some of the albums and some of the songs and sounds that we had in the 90s, because they definitely set the blueprint. Again, if you have not heard this album in a while, make sure that you listen to it. It is an incredible album. Like I said, 9 out of 10 tracks, phenomenal. You could probably, and there may be some people that like My Business. Just to give you an idea, of the 10 tracks, 8 of the 10 tracks were on radio. They were singles, legit singles. And that doesn't happen unless you have a bomb ass album. And that's exactly what this was. So, there's not really much you could say bad about this album. This is an incredible album. And Guy, they were an incredible group. And I'm glad that they got together. I don't know, how or why Timmy Gatlin left, but, they kept it moving. And this album, like I said, it resonates for me, and hopefully it does for you as well. Again, if you haven't checked it out, make sure that you take a listen and give me your feedback. Let me know what you think. If there are any songs that you didn't like, hit me up and let me know. That's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5 G's.